Hello everyone. Today I've got a real page turner for you. Just picture this, two young girls, driven by curiosity and a bit of recklessness, decide to infiltrate the domain of the notorious King of the North. They hide beneath bushes, avoiding detection from the elite guards. Their fear is almost tangible as they inch closer to the king's fortress. But the real drama starts when they sneak into the village and witness the ceremony. As they try to get a better view from a rooftop, disaster strikes. The king spots one of the girls, and their eyes lock in a moment that changes everything. The shift in atmosphere from stealthy adventure to heart-pounding confrontation is electrifying. How will the king react to this intrusion? Will the girls find a way out of this alive? Let's uncover the answers together as we explore this thrilling tale. Chapter 1. We shouldn't be here. May whimpered, her cautious nature getting the better of her as we huddled beneath the dense foliage, just out of sight of the patrolling soldiers. Shush, I hissed, shooting her a stern glance before returning my attention to the small squadron marching past. These were the King of the North's elite border guards. Their senses detected even the slightest disturbance. It was a miracle they hadn't discovered us yet. Do you want to see him or not? I grumbled once they were out of earshot, my adventurous spirit overshadowing my better judgment. Yes, but not at this risk. This is the only way. May. It's not like 𝐿𝐲𝐬𝐬's going to pay a peaceful visit to the village anytime soon. I could feel May's nervous fidgeting behind me, her worry palpable in the tense atmosphere. Despite my outward bravado, I couldn't deny the truth to myself. This was a reckless endeavor. We had ventured too far into the king's territory to simply turn back now. The sun hung high in the sky, signaling midday. We would need to wait at least 6 more hours until nightfall, our only chance of descending the treacherous mountain undetected. We shouldn't have done this, May groaned as I cautiously rose from our leafy sanctuary, the heavy fabric of my dress catching on sharp twigs. I found myself wishing I had borrowed some of 𝐿𝐲𝐬𝐬's more practical attire for this daring expedition. Peering over the bush, I could just make out the spires of the king's fortress looming above the treetops. Maybe we should just head back. Immerse, May pleaded, her grip on my sleeve tightening. I ignored her frightened tone, even though I knew she was right. My determination to see this through outweighed my growing apprehension. We are so close. I can see his castle, I whispered in awe, double-checking the narrow dirt path before crawling out from our hiding spot. May reluctantly followed, her reluctance evident in every movement. We'll head back as soon as the sun sets. I promise. I offered her a reassuring smile, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. The rumors surrounding the King of the North were far from pleasant, and I had little doubt of their veracity. What had possessed me to suggest this perilous journey into his domain? The tales of his treatment of unwary travelers were horrifying enough, and I shuddered to think what fate might befall us if we were discovered. He'll eat the raw flesh from our bones, May's voice quavered as she vocalized my unspoken fears. Despite the gravity of our situation, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Yes, and he will also make soup with our blood and liver. I snickered, noting the horror etched across May's face. Relax, May, those are just stories. I highly doubt that they're true. My words did little to assuage her fears. If anything, she looked even more ill at ease. I rolled my eyes and turned back towards the path, my own nervousness barely concealed beneath my facade of confidence. Despite my dismissive attitude, even I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that settled over us like a heavy shroud. The King of the North. That's what they called him. No one knew his true name, but his title alone was enough to make most shiver. Even me, though I tried to hide the fact from the trembling girl a few feet behind me. The king and a few of his soldiers had visited the lower kingdom a few months ago, and word of his awe-inspiring beauty had reached even the darkest corners of the far north that made up our home. This little trip wasn't an attempt to meet him, or even fawn over him like many of the southern women were said to have done. Oh no, that would definitely lead to our death. We just wanted a glimpse of him. One tiny little glimpse of that other, worldly beauty the villagers and townspeople seemed consumed by. But no one was ever dumb enough to venture into his castle, much less his territory, to find out. Except, for me. And I dragged poor, dear, sweet May along with me. I wouldn't let her fool me, though. I knew she wanted to see him too. I just could not get that rambling nagging out of my head. One look. Just one look. It repeated over and over again in my mind like a dark mantra, until it left thought taking over my subconscious. I knew, even if it was only one quick glimpse, that should have been enough to satisfy the persistent voice pounding away in my skull. May's death grip held onto the long lapel of my rather thin cloak as her frightened hazel eyes glanced frantically around the forest. I tried to shake off that same fear coursing through her gaze as it crept slowly into my chest. Just one look. Just one. The small squad of soldiers were nowhere in sight, and I let the soft sounds of the forest slowly calm my racing nerves. I was never one to do something so dangerous. Usually May and I were in the same boat when it came to keeping our noses out of trouble, but I could not stop this desire inside of me. The tall, overhanging trees made a dark canopy of green that let little light through. It was only because of the thin strands sparkling on the ground that we could tell it was still daytime. The snow softly gleamed under those thin streams, and I marveled at the crystallized beauty. I loved the snow, the cold, the northern kingdom. It was my home, where I was born, where I was raised. The mountain called to me more than any place ever had before. My heart ached every time we took a trip to the lower kingdom. There was no cold there, and it never snowed. May's cloak was thicker than mine, and I could feel it brush against me every time a little woodland creature made a noise and she took a step closer. I kept my back straight and my breathing even. I had to be brave for both of us. After all, it was my stupid idea to come here in the first place. Her grip on me tightened as the trees around us began to thin, and the snow under our feet grew deeper. We were reaching the edge of the forest and the entrance to his village. The king of the north might have been our king on paper, but he hardly ever left the village surrounding his castle, and he more or less left the other towns to fend for ourselves. He cared for no one, and nothing apart from his people. The wolf-born. I was surprised to find no wall surrounding the kingdom, and even more surprised when we spotted only a few guards sulking around the outskirts. As far as we could tell, the few houses near the entrance were empty, and besides the occasional guard, there appeared to be no one near. Is it supposed to be this? Empty? May asked softly from behind me as we crouched low behind a shrub near the edge of the forest. I don't think so, I whispered back as a guard walked past the entrance before disappearing around a corner. Maybe there's something going on in their square. Let's go find out. I didn't give her a second to register what I said before I shot out of the shelter of trees and headed straight for the village entrance. May stumbled quickly after me. Wait. She hissed at me as I quickly jumped around the side of a house with her toppling on top of me just in time to avoid the guard walking by. What the hell Mrie? Give me some warning next time. I gave her a sheepish smile as she brushed the snow off the front of her thick dress. Sorry, May. She ignored my weak apology, but shot me a scowl anyway as I shimmied around the back of the house. I peeked around the corner of the cold stone structure to make sure the guard had passed before quickly sneaking my way to the next one. They were all squished together with very thin strips of ground separating the tiny shacks, just big enough for her and I to squeeze through. I didn't know what I was expecting, really. It was just like any other village, except for the wall. Maybe I was hoping the rumors would be true and that there were wolf dens and wolves themselves running around everywhere. But there weren't, and I cowed and helped the disappointment that surged through me. We had just squished in the little crawl-like space between two houses when movement flashed in the corner of my eye. I quickly shoved May into the side of the house and slapped my hand over her mouth as one grumpy-looking guard stormed past the little alley with cursed words tumbling under his breath. I didn't let go of her until he exited the village. She groaned and rubbed the back of her head as I stuck my head out into the main street. We really shouldn't be here. Emmy, she mumbled as I turned around and walked towards the end of the alley. Bingo. There was a little space between the back of the stores and houses for a few small bodies to fit through. I shot her a victorious smile and wiggled my way into the little space. I could hear the profanities grumbled under her breath, but chose to ignore them. I was the one who persisted to come here. She had a right to be a little peeved. It's not too late to turn back. You know. She tried once again to persuade me from the goal I was 100. I shot her an apologetic smile. The space was so small we're nearly squished flush against each other, and I could practically feel the fear streaming off her. No one has caught us yet. We can turn around and go home one look. I only need one look. I honestly had no idea why I was so adamant about seeing him. It truly was a stupid idea. I wished I could have just stayed home on my little cot next to some cozy fire and be content with the image my imagination created of him, but I couldn't. It was a fascination to see him. It was a need. What happens if we get caught? She whispered as we edged our way behind the houses. I honestly was sure we were going, but this way felt right, so I was sticking with it. Honestly, I have no clue. I'll probably just wing it. Her arm shot out of the air and gripped onto me tighter than any death grip she had ever given. I turned to her with a raised eyebrow. Her wide, terrified eyes stared back in anger. You'll just wing it. I shrugged my shoulders and nodded. Her hazel eyes only widened even more. I turned away from her and began scooting back down the passage. I haven't really thought ahead this far. I was almost positive we would have been caught by now. I'm going back. Immerse. This was a horrible idea. I hissed as loud voices suddenly broke through the silence surrounding us. I grabbed a hold of her hand and crouched down low as shadows passed the end of the passage just 4 feet away from us. She squished against my back in terror. At least one of us had something to lean on. The king is running late. Something about some stragglers near the border. A gruff voice that suggested the owner was twice the size of a normal man reached our ears. I gulped. The quiet gasp of terror that passed from May's lips let me know she was thinking the same thing as me. Was he talking about us? You think they would learn by now? Another voice chuckled as I pushed May and I back a foot when the shadows drew closer to the passage's opening. I didn't even want to think about what would happen if we were caught now. In their village. Right under their noses. Gear raced down my spine. God, we should have turned back. We should still turn back. But I can't. Just one look. They were handled by the Southern Patrol. Just some family passing through. Relief slammed into my chest and I tried to hold back my heavy sigh as me. Luck must have been on our side that day. The ceremony is about to start. Are you headed that way? Their voices trailed off as their shadows faded away, and I nearly fell on my hands and knees in relief. We weren't caught. And that hadn't been us they were talking about. That was close. We should really go now. May whispered and tugged on my hand as I climbed back onto my feet. Are you crazy? Did you hear what they were saying? There's a ceremony going on. And we get to find out what. Excitement overtook my fear and I was holding onto her hand with new vigor as I checked the small street outside the passage. The King of the North and his people were not only highly feared, but highly secretive. No one knew what they did all the way up in their tight-knit little village. And we were going to find out. Not only did I finally get to see him, but I got to see a little glimpse into their culture as well. That was more than any shifter at the base of the mountain ever saw. I pulled May across the vacant, snow-covered, cobblestone street and into an alley that held a bright light at the end. I edged us as close as I dared. On the other side of the 2 wooden planked stores we were crouching behind was a flat area filled to the brim with people. Most of them were huge male figures with small children and women woven in between them. Whoa, there were stories about the size of the northern soldiers. And despite a few confirmations from those in the lower kingdom, many thought they were over-exaggerated. They weren't. In the middle of the throng of people there was a raised platform with 6 large wooden chairs sitting in a row and a throne sitting proudly between them. I can't see anything. I groaned as someone walked onto the stage and the villagers cheered. The loud, booming voices of the men sent vibrations through my entire body. These people made me feel like a 4-foot-sized monkey. And maybe that's a good thing. May mumbled as I stood on my tiptoes and tried to glance over the tall bodies 15 feet away from us. This could be an execution. Oh, or a punishment. We shouldn't be here. Help me look for somewhere higher to watch. I had barely finished speaking when I saw a thin copper ladder attached to the side of the house we were crouched against. I cowed and helped the smile that reached my lips. Yes. No, Immerse. Don't. I ignored the desperate plea in her voice and reached up until I had a firm grip on the bottom rung. I wanted to laugh out loud at the excitement surging through me, but I knew better than that. It took me a good minute or two before I could haul myself up enough to plant my feet on the bottom of the old iron ladder. Are you coming or what? I whispered down at her as I began climbing the rest of the way to the roof. When I finally pulled myself onto the hard wooden roof with a grumpy me following behind me, 6 venomous males had begun filing onto the stage. I sent her a sly smile which she chose to ignore. I knew she would follow. We crouched low to the floor of the roof and hid behind the small ledge that enclosed the building. We could see everything from this height, and thankfully they couldn't see us. Hopefully they couldn't see us. We watched 6 giant, brutish-looking men walk along the stage and take what I assumed was their respected seats. The throne remained empty. I frowned. Where was he? That unnatural feeling hidden deep inside me flipped uneasily as a man shorter and thinner than the rest walked onto the stage. Something about him was off and dark. Please don't let that be the king. I apologize for the delay. But his voice reverberated throughout the whole area without major effort. Wow, only the elders in our village could do that. Our great king had some important matters to attend to. But now the ceremony can begin. The crowd cheered as the creepy announcer raised his hands. I watched in blatant wonder as he held his thin, long, white arm out towards the stone steps at the base of the platform. The cheers were quiet and respectful as a figure the size of 2 male villagers put together stepped onto the stage. My eyes widened at the impossible size of the man. That was definitely the king. There, Immerse. You saw him. Can we please go now? Me begged as her eyes darted around the large guards below us. I frowned in disappointment. You're kidding, right? We haven't seen any of him. Which was true. That nagging in my head didn't fade or diminish as the big, no doubt muscled, covered figure took a seat on his throne. He was covered from head to toe in black. He wore a long black cloak over and equally black pants and tunic that clung to his huge body. A hood was pulled far over his head and hid all features from the view of his people, and me. I'm sure this is what his people see every day. We can not risk being here any longer. She tugged on my hand and tried to edge back towards the ladder, but I only dragged her down again. Not yet. I want to see what the ceremony is. She let out a loud groan and fell flat on her stomach beside me. Emmy, please. I hardly ever beg, but I'm begging you now. Please let's go while everyone is distracted. It's starting. I waved her off as the announcer gained the attention back from the crowd and away from the king. But I cowed and found it in me to tear my eyes off him. He looked like he was trying to appear lazy and relaxed in the throne that was so generous it had to be made specifically for him, but I could see the way he leaned slightly off his right shoulder. He was in pain. A phantom ache surged through my own arm, and I rubbed it obsessively as the creepy announcer addressed the crowd once again. On this 5th day of the new year, we gather together to celebrate the ceremony of our great king's birth. I groaned in disappointment as the crowd once again clapped and let out respectful cheers. They were here for his birthday. Just perfect. Some great secret ceremony we stumbled on. But I still didn't want to leave, and I cowed and tear my gaze off the overly large man resting against the back of the throne, his arms crossed lazily over his chest, his left shoulder hanging just a fraction lower than the right. I had no idea why I noticed it. Or how, but that small symbol of pain drew my eyes to him like a magnet. Despite that, his body language suggested that he was just as annoyed at the ceremony as I was. The announcer, person I didn't like, started trailing off about something to do with the moon and stars, and some cosmic thingy, but I was staring too hard at the king to notice. Just one look, one glimpse was all I needed, and then we could run out of here like the underworld was on our heels. I just needed him to turn his head up a little bit, just enough so the light of the sun could hit his face under that hood. What are you doing?" I hadn't realized I was leaning over the edge of the roof, like I could somehow get closer to him, until May's hand suddenly gripped onto my arm and yanked me back. If anyone had looked up at that moment, they would have seen me hanging almost completely over the side of the building, and we would have been screwed. "Shoot," I hissed as she pulled me back down and crouched low like that would help what just happened. "Did anyone see you?" she gasped as we crouched even lower on the roof. I didn't dare try and glance at the crowd. "I have no idea." Let me check. My voice, as well as my body, shook as I carefully peeked over the edge. A breath of relief left me when I saw everyone's attention focused on the announcer, even the men sitting in the 6 chairs on stage, except one. Chapter to holy fuck. I hardly cussed. Usually never, but as a pair of eyes so lightning blue that I could feel their electricity pierce my soul locked on mine, it seemed fitting. He had seen me. The King of the North had seen my fumble and was staring up at me in a gaze that froze the very air in my lungs. Our eyes locked. My heart stopped, and his curious hooded head tilted to the side. There was this sudden disturbing feeling in my stomach, one that turned uneasily and made me want to hurl. I groaned as my grip on the edge turned my knuckles white. Oh my God, he was gorgeous. The rumors and tales of his beauty from the south were nothing compared to the thing who was staring up at me now. I gulped. "What is it?" May hissed as she peeked up from her hiding spot. I couldn't stop her, couldn't pull her away before she saw the damage I had caused. I was as frozen as a statue. Oh my God, Immerse looking right at us. "We need to go now." I didn't argue with her as she tore my hand from the edge and dragged me back towards the ladder. I couldn't break eye contact with him. I physically could not. Something in those lightning eyes was holding me captive and refusing to let go. It made panic flare in my chest. I felt like I was in a trance, like my body was only agreeing to follow me down the ladder because that was what I needed to do to get closer to him. I was too dumb to realize how truly terrified I was. The spell was broken as those terrifyingly beautiful eyes glanced at the frantic girl pulling me towards the ladder. I felt air suddenly return to my lungs as his electric gaze hardened, and his hands gripped tightly onto the armrests of his throne. Definitely time to go. I finally tore my eyes off him before he could lock our gazes again and rushed down the ladder after May. Oh my God, we took off running in a vicious sprint the minute our feet hit solid ground. I didn't care about sneaking around anymore, or being quiet. Our main goal was to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. I was terrified that one of his infamous huge warriors would jump out of the houses surrounding us and tear at our throats with their sharp fang-like teeth. I ran faster. We were just at the edge of the village, no guard in sight, when the shouting started. Loud, deep, male voices rang throughout the whole town as the sound of stomping feet pounded the pavement. I shouted as we burst out of the village and ran full speed into the dense trees of the forest. Our only hope was that the thick foliage and the snow falling heavily from sky would cover our presence. But against wolf-borns, I doubted we would make it out of there alive. Especially since he saw us, the very he that sent cities trembling at the near thought of. My heart pounded viciously in my chest as fear coursed deep through my body. He had seen me. We had locked gazes. The King of the North saw an intruder with his very own terrifyingly gorgeous eyes, and I had no doubt that the feeling creeping down my spine was death. I was going to die today. We didn't stop for rest or air as we ran full speed down the dirt path we took to get there. May's shifter was enough to keep her going for a while, but my need to not die was all I had going for me. I tried to push faster as the shouts behind us only grew in both tone and number. They were definitely after us now, and by the sounds of it, they were a lot faster than us. We weren't far enough away when May suddenly cowled and hold back her animal anymore. Her fear was far too strong to remain human. Her clothes shred to pieces as she shifted mid-run, and the sleek pelt of her snow leopard emerged as she shot like a bullet away from me. My heart dropped to my stomach as I watched her basically fly away from me. Well, hell, hopefully she will be able to get away. I didn't stop running though. I cowled and shifted, and I knew they would catch me sooner or later, but I still kept going. like a last-ditch effort to keep my short life. She stopped several meters ahead and her glistening white fur shimmered as she glanced back with a whine. But I waved her off. "Go, May. Run, 𝐿𝐴." She whined again and pawed the ground, but I waved harder and screamed at her to go. She had a chance to get away, and I would only slow her down if she waited for me, and I highly doubted we would be able to out-wolf Borns if I was on her back. She needed to go. She let out one last long whine before turning on her heels and heading in the direction of her brother's tower. Her brother 𝐊𝐴𝐳 was pretty much in charge of our little village at the base of the mountain, and he was the only chance I had if the king let me live. I knew I was going to escape them. No way. No how, but that didn't stop the small shred of hope glowing in my chest. If I could just reach the border of their territory and the towns, they wouldn't be able to do anything without negotiations. But I knew that was impossible. It took us half a day just to get to the border of our village, and the rest to reach his kingdom. At least me and her leopard form could reach it in an hour or two. I could hear loud howls behind me, the thundering roars of a people whose privacy had just been infringed on. I knew in that very moment that there was no hope for my life. If they caught me, I would die. I snuck across their border, across their land, into their village, and witnessed part of their ceremony without being detected. Their pride would not let them let me live. At least I got to see him before I died. I shook my head of thought and shoved on. Was it really worth it? That glimpse I subtly craved was breaking into his kingdom, his ceremony, just to see him worth my life. The nagging mead in my head had disappeared, only to be replaced with one that begged me to turn around and stare into those beautiful eyes until I died, until he killed me. Was it worth my life? Yes, it was. Eventually, I had to stop running. I couldn't help it. Air wouldn't reach my lungs and I had a cramp the size of the lower kingdom stuck in my side. I needed a minute, just a minute to regain my breathing. Then I could run again. But luck had left my sad minute I so desperately needed. The howls that reached my ears in the quickly fading daylight were too close for comfort. My hands ran furiously through my hair as I frantically looked for some kind of hiding spot, any kind. It was when I heard the sound of pounding paws on snow that I found a little cubby, like hole dug at the base of a tree. My heart soared in my chest. Freaking yes. I murmured and dived into the little cubby without thinking of the little critters whom I probably just disturbed. I tried to still my breathing and ease my rapidly pounding heart as a group of wolves who were twice the size of me, and equally as ferocious looking, came storming down the path I had barely escaped. I pressed back into the dark cut of the tree as far as I could. I was terrified they could hear my heart, could smell the fear rolling off me in waves as they paused and sniffed the air. I just prayed the bushes' smell surrounding me was strong enough to mask my scent. They were so tall I could really only see their paws as they ground and howled. They truly were wolf-born, those that hail solely from the moon. Night worshippers in their finest. Their stories and rumors were almost as great as their kings. I closed my eyes and prayed they wouldn't find me. They howled one last time before pawing at the ground and taking off back down the mountain. I prayed May was already across the border. I can't believe that worked. I felt hope start to swell in my chest, but quickly squished it down as I waited a few more minutes in the little hole. I was going to even let myself think of hope until I reached the border, if I reached the border. I waited until the silence filling the dense forest was once again humming with the sounds of the small creatures living there. I let out a heavy sigh as the moon slowly took its respectful spot in the sky and I began to slowly edge my way out of my hiding spot. I let out a heavy sigh and rested my head against the cold snow as I tried to clear the fear-filled thoughts running freely through it. There was absolutely no way I was going to get out of there alive. At least not while I was on that path. There would no doubt be patrols surrounding all paths on every side of the territory until the intruders were caught. If I kept running down that one I was bound to collide with a guard, or a wolf. My only choice was to go off-road, to make my own path down a haphazard mountain I had never scaled before. Here goes nothing. I groaned as I turned off the path and headed in the opposite direction of the venomous wolves that I'm pretty sure were set on eating me. I had no idea how long I was walking. My only judge of time was the moon's position in the sky, and even that didn't offer any comfort. I felt like the further I walked, the further I wandered into the density of the forest. Benny feared these woods, these trees. The rumors that circled around them were almost as intense as those of the King of the North, but I feared him more. Even if his eyes were the most beautiful crystal clear, electric blue I had ever seen, I wandered further down the mountain and into the dense forest. Those eyes were unlike any I had ever seen before. The way they held me there on that roof, the way they caused my whole being to freeze, was unlike anything I had ever felt before. I hadn't wanted to leave, to move. I wanted to stay in that very same position and never look away. And the freakiest part was that, for a moment, just a moment, I thought he wanted that too. He hadn't freaked when he saw me standing there, peeking up at him over the roof. He didn't automatically call his guards to capture us. He had just sat there silently and stared with seemingly as much curiosity as I did at him. It was unnerving. A branch snapping somewhere from behind drew me from my thoughts, and I halted as the sounds of the forest quieted once more. I could feel eyes now, watching me, following my every movement. There were no small chirps of the birds, or murmurs of other little animals, a telltale sign that a predator was among them. Fear gripped my heart in an icy cage. Were they back? Did they follow my scent? This was good. Another branch snapped behind me as if large pawed quiet places to put them. Relax, 𝐿. Breathe. I told myself quietly as I gripped tightly at the end of my sleeves. I'm sure it's not a wolf. Maybe it's a bear. Oh, or a mountain lion. Neither of those options were reassuring there. When a growl so low and powerful that it sent shock of vibration through me sounded in the silence, I ran like my little bitty heart would never give out from overexertion. Obviously, I didn't make it very far. I had barely ran 5 feet before the beast tackled me to the ground from behind. The air was knocked out of me for a few long, fearful seconds, and I sat there gasping as the giant monster pinned me to the ground. From what I could tell by the weight crushing me, the body was huge, at least twice as the wolves I saw before, and more around for times the size of me. A body that big should have crushed me to death in an instant. I was sure if I should be thankful that it didn't. I sucked in long fullness of air as the beast teased slightly off my trembling body. I didn't want to turn around and face it. I just wanted to curl in a ball and bury my face in my knees. But a dark growl had me cautiously rolling over to my back. Then I screamed the ever-loving daylights out of me. The shrill sound of my voice reverberated through the trees, but I didn't get much more out as the giant wolf's head launched for my throat. My scream stuck in my lungs, and my eyes slammed shut as I waited for the inevitable tearing of flesh those giant fangs would rip from my throat, along with the agonizing pain of death, but it never came. I trembled in terrified fear as I felt hot breath continuously hit my cheek, neck, and shoulder. Teeth just barely touched the edge of my skin as a hot, wet pressure rested firmly against the base of my throat. I slowly pried my eyes open to stare up at a wolf whose fur was blacker than the night sky during a new moon hovering over me with my neck grasped gently in its venomous jaw. It was tearing into me. It was kill me, but it was making me know damn well that it could. The beast's want was simple: shut the hell up. So I did. We stayed in that silent a few long minutes as the abnormally giant creature made sure I knew who the dominant one was in this situation, and I was all too eager to agree. Anything to keep my throat safely intact. I lay flat on the ground when the wolf finally let go of me, and kept the scream that so desperately wanted to breach my lips stuffed tightly down my throat. The huge beast didn't move off me as he raised his head, a head that was larger than any animal I had ever seen, and glanced down at me. I gasped. Those eyes, the eyes I had been wondering about for my entire disastrous trip down the mountain. Eyes so blue they put the daytime sky to shame. This ginormous, huge, abnormally large monster was the King of the North. My heart dropped to my stomach. Good Lord, I really was going to die. He let out a hot breath of air that blew straight at my face. I gulped. His beautiful eyes narrowed and his giant head tilted to the side like it had the first time our eyes locked together. All 4 of his ginormous, muscled legs kept me trapped under him. I shuddered under his glare. He was probably thinking of the best way to eat me, but he didn't. Our gaze stayed locked in that intense stare as his electrifying blue eyes shot lightning straight to the pit of my stomach. His gaze made my insides feel frozen, but it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable. The longer I gazed up at that beautiful blue, the more I never wanted to look away. It was hauntingly beautiful, in a very dangerous kind of way. My nervous, fearful breathing slowly eased until it matched the relatively calm ones of the wolf. He seemed so relaxed, so at ease, that it made my body slowly follow suit. My mind was too far gone in his eyes to notice, but that's when I caught the slight tremor in his left arm, the arm that I could tell was hurt earlier. It must be bothering him to stand on it for this long, much less suffer through all that running I was sure he did to track me down. I tore my eyes away from his agonizingly beautiful ones to glance over his injured arm. He let out a dark growl at the action and I him as his lip raised in a snarl. My eyes glanced back over to his as he tried to hide the slight tremor. He let out a low growl again. "Why, you're hurt." My voice was barely a whisper as I glanced over back his arm. His body froze above mine for a second. Just a second, before he let out another snarl. I can help you," I murmured softly as he stood to his full height over me. I gulped. What exactly was I trying to do? Escape in any way I could. Help him? I had no idea. But the insane part of me that needed to see him, and noticed he was hurt in the first place, wanted me to desperately do something. I slowly raised my hand from its strapped position at my side and went to gently touch his left arm that let out a small shake next to my shoulder. He growled as my hand got closer to him. "It's okay." I eased softly as my fingertips gently brushed over the muscle just above his paw. It wasn't hurt there, it was in his shoulder that the tendon had torn. But I didn't want to frighten him. Isn't this an ironic situation? "See, I won't hurt you." I eased softly as I let just the tip of my fingers run from the paw that was as big as my face up to his muscled knee. I saw amusement flash in those bright blue eyes, and he seemed to almost let out a wolfish snicker. I cowed and helped the smile that tugged at my own lips. I guess he was right. He could kill me with a hurt shoulder or not. I just said I wouldn't hurt him as a formality. I honestly had no idea why I wanted to help the king who sent his beasts after me and my friend. But this aching tug inside of me demanded that I did. "Let me help you, please," I asked softly as I ran my fingers along his soft paw again. He snapped his jaw shut and hesitated for a moment before he let out one more growl. Was that a no or? He eased his ginormous body off me and slowly set not an inch away from my left side. I carefully and very slowly rose to a sitting position next to him. I didn't want to make any sudden moves and have him lunge at me again. His beautiful eyes watched me in cold calculation as I slowly turned my body toward his. I licked my lips and tried not to let fear race down my spine as I placed one hand on the part of his arm just below his shoulder and the other out in the open for him to see. "Do you mind if I touch the part that hurts?" I asked softly as his abnormally large head turned to look at me. So I took that as a yes, but I still proceeded with caution. I didn't need him changing his mind at the last minute and eating me. I could basically see the torn tendon throbbing painfully under his fur and skin, and frowned at the red lines of pain flowing down his arm. "This looks incredibly painful." I mumbled more to myself than anything as I gently, and with one hand, probed the area around the tendon. "Don't you wolf, borns heal incredibly fast or something," I grumbled as I gently rubbed down the red pain line with 2 fingers. I had only been able to see pain in someone one other time, and that time hadn't been pleasant either. I don't know why the healing sight comes or goes, but it does, and like the nagging inside my head, it wanted me to help him. He rolled his beautiful eyes and let out something close to a snort. I sent him a small glare, but otherwise ignored him. This might hurt a little, so don't bite my head off. "Okay," I mumbled as I finally let my other hand rest gently on his upper arm. He locked our gazes again, and I stared into those blue eyes for a few long seconds before he gave me a slow blink. I took that as a yes. I gripped onto his upper arm tightly for some form of stability as I let my end rub gently across the torn tendon. I hadn't done this since I was a kid, and the last time I ended up unconscious for 3 days. I didn't even want to think what would happen now, so my dumb ass didn't. Helping him was my #1 top priority at the moment. Not my safety, and that knowledge alone confused me, but I didn't linger on it long. That nagging in me wouldn't let me. Here goes nothing, I grumbled as he stared down at me with an amused curiosity. His pompous wolf didn't believe I could help him. Well, I'll show him. I closed my eyes, let out a few deep breaths until I felt slightly lightheaded, and embraced that small glow of heat that simmered in my chest, when I felt that my mind and body had a firm grasp on the beautiful gold humming through my being. I pressed my thumb into his torn tendon. He howled into the night air as my finger jammed itself into his hurt shoulder, and tried to viciously tug himself away from me, but the gold shimmer well, I don't really know what it was zipping through me stronger than the lightning in his eyes had, and it was holding him firmly in my grasp. At least he was trying to bite me. This was a power I could not control. It controlled me, my soul, and it let me tap into it now and then. Apparently, it liked this beast that was trying to tear himself from me. The beautiful golden warmth flowed from my chest, down my arm, into my thumb, and then finally into the torn tendon of his shoulder. As soon as the gold hit his wound, he froze. His body no longer desperately tried to rid itself out of my hold, and I could feel his eyes watching me in amazement as I kept mine closed and hummed. As the gold shimmer healed the tendon, my eyes slowly blinked open, and I watched the red lines of pain shooting down his arm turn to gold as this power healed him. I let out a small smile. There's a wish there. That was better. Once I was satisfied it had done its job, I tried to call the power back to me, back to my chest and into my soul where it would rest once again, but it denied me. I gasped as a full-blown surge of power ripped through my chest and into his body. It wanted him. It wanted to be in him. I could feel it. It wanted to flow into his heart, into his being, and heal every scratch, scar, and cut in his body. Air escaped my lungs as more and more of the gold power fled my body and into his. Black dots danced around my vision, and I clawed at my throat with my free hand. I couldn't let go of him. I couldn't drop my hand. The gold power wouldn't let me. It no longer wanted to be in me. In my soul, it wanted to be in his. And it was going to kill me to do so if it had to. I heard him let out a strangled cry and bark as my thumb dug deeper into his shoulder. I'm sorry. I wanted to cry out to him, to let him know that I didn't mean to hurt him, but the power wouldn't let me breathe enough to say anything. Tears suddenly streamed down my cheeks as air refused to enter my lungs, and the black dots dancing around my vision were quickly growing until all I could see were thin slits of the moon's light. I clawed at my throat, and then the ground like that would help me cut the power off, but it didn't. I felt the wolf biting gently into my wrist, like that would make me let go. It didn't, and the harder he bit, the more the golden power wanted to be in him. So this was the end. This was how I was going to die. That warm, golden power I had thought was a gift was draining from me faster than blood from a cut wrist. And it was killing me. At least I helped him. The last thing I was aware of was a wet tongue running hastily over my face, and a pair of bright, beautiful eyes staring worriedly into mine. Chapter 3. There was a hard warmth radiating against the side of my body, a smooth, solid warmth that I tried to cling to with all my might, but my body wouldn't let me. I couldn't move. I couldn't feel any part of me, except for the cold hitting my left side, and that amazing warmth hitting my right. I could feel myself being lifted and carried, but no idea to where. But it had to have been far. The warmth had been carrying me for quite a while. As time passed, I still couldn't move my body, or open my eyes, but I could hear the sounds of the trees we passed, and the breathing of what I assumed was a person carrying me. What happened to me? Why can't I move? Where was I? I couldn't make my mouth open to voice any of those plaguing questions, and the thought of never being able to move again raced across my mind. My breathing hitched in my chest as that fear hit my heart. Well, I'll wish. Well, maybe hyperventilating was a good sign. Shit's okay. My panic eased. That voice, It was beautiful, like the sound of a waterfall you would listen to from a distance, or the dark melody of the creatures of the night. I wanted to hear it over and over again. I wanted those two words replaying in my head for an eternity. I decided the voice belonged to the person carrying me, the one who was so warm it traveled through my whole body. It wasn't long before the sleep started to swamp over my shoulders again. The panic started to grow. No, if I sleep I might miss hearing him talk. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't. I could barely feel that warm body stopped walking and grip tighter onto my immobile body. I wanted to push further into it, let that warmth flow over my entire being. But the vague sound of angry voices reached my ears, and I tried my hardest to listen before that cloud of sleep overtook my mind. "What have you done?" I was barely able to make out that one sentence before the voices went barely. Their mumbles. "Give her to me. Healers will help." The thick arms supporting me squeezed tighter, and the body I was pressed against let out a dangerous growl. Then more growls surrounded around us. My breath caught in my throat again in fear. "She's awake. Give her to that. They can help. She's awake." I felt my body lift from the warmth that had kept me safe, and the fear of being taken away from that voice I could listen to for hours hit me hard. My chest tightened, and the air had a harder time reaching my lungs the minute that warmth I wanted to desperately cling to vanished. I couldn't control my body, and I couldn't stop the hyperventilating the panic brought on. It was gone. That voice, that warmth, it was gone. It was coming back. It left me alone. It left me in danger. I needed it. I'm right here. That beautiful voice was in my ears again, and as that warmth surrounded me once more, the hyperventilating stopped. The body curled me tighter into it like I had been asking it to the whole time. "Well, the hell, this is a problem," I heard a voice mumble from the distance as the sleep that wanted to so desperately take over from before finally did, and light shined brightly down onto my closed eyelids. And I groaned. My body ached, and my chest and lungs felt sore from what? I had no idea. I took a few ragged breaths and gently clutched at the sheet beneath me before slowly opening my shut eyes. Despite the few beams of light shining through the window, the tiny room I was lying in held a thinly lit candle sitting on a little wooden table in the corner of the room, with that big sleeping teddy, bear of a town leader, sitting beside it. A small smile pulled at my cracked lips. "Hey, Lay." My voice was hoarse and rather weak, and I cringed as the sound reached my ears. Liko West jerked awake, and his large brown eyes flashed to mine. "You're awake." He let out a tired sigh but shot me a wide smile as he stood from the wooden stool so he could kneel beside me. "I was so worried about you, little cub," he mumbled as he reached up and gently rubbed down my hair. The dark brown of his eyes shined down at me in worry. "I'm okay." My throat was dry and it hurt to speak as my voice croaked past my lips. "Here, drink this," he commanded instead of answering, and held a small cup of water up to my lips. I drank from it greedily and pouted when he took it away. "Not too fast. You'll get sick." I gave a weak attempt of rolling my eyes, but he just laughed. Then all the humor faded from his voice. "Do you know how scared I was when they came storming into the house shouting all these crazy things, the Northwest guards chasing you?" I dropped my gaze in shame, but couldn't stop my breath from catching in my throat. Just hearing his title sent the memory of our disastrous adventure surging to the forefront of my mind. Oh my God, what had happened? What had made the gold power lose control like that? Why did it want him so much? Why did it try to kill me? What the hell were you thinking? Running off into the king's territory like that? You know it's forbidden. You know no one is even allowed near the border. I flinched at his tone, and my eyes widened as his strong hands gripped my upper arms tightly. "I am sorry, Lay. I was thinking you're fucking right. You weren't thinking Immerse. What do you think would have happened if you had been caught before the king knew you were his?" His dark eyes flashed, and he snapped his mouth shut before glancing away from me. I felt a frown pull at my lips. Did healing the king make me something to him? His healer? Because if that's the case, then they could all forget it. I was never going to use the gold power again, before he knew I was his what? 𝐿𝐿𝐲 licked his lips and let out a heavy sigh before standing from the side of the cot I was laying on. Let me go get the elders. They wanted me to wait to talk to you until they were present. What? Wait, why dealing with the elders was never fun. They really only ever got involved with villager business when something very bad had happened, or a decision regarding the entire town had to be made. They let Lei usually handle everything, and his dad before him. I didn't even want to wonder why they were suddenly interested in me. I blinked up at him in confusion as he turned to leave the room. He'll tell you everything in a minute. The anger from my disobedience seemed to have vanished from his gaze, but it was only replaced with a thick sheen of worry. It made my frown grow. I tried to sit up on the bed, but my body ached and I could hardly move my arms enough to prop my upper body against the pillows. I let out a heavy sigh and just waited. It was barely a few minutes before the town leader returned with the 4 elders of our little village, which only made the worry in my chest grow. It usually took hours to assemble the small council of the village, if not days. And here they were waiting for me. Little cub. There really isn't any easy way to approach this. But 𝐿𝐿𝐲 started his brown eyes dark, but a stern look from Elder 𝐿𝐲𝐼 had him clearing his throat and starting over. My nerves grew. This really was going to be a pleasant meeting. We believe that you are. 𝐿𝐿𝐲𝐼 didn't finish his sentence, and that only made the grip on my chest tightened. I swallowed nervously. This was not going to be good. Elder 𝐾𝐞𝐽 stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on May's older brother's shoulder, who shot him a relieved smile. We have reason to believe that you are the king of the North's mate. My heart seemed to stop as silence followed Elder 𝐾𝐞𝐽's statement, and all I could do was staring up at the 4 white, robed figures in confusion. But that's impossible, you said that was impossible. None of them seemed to want to meet my gaze. And for the first time in my entire existence, I watched them stare nervously at the ground or at one another. Yes? Elder 𝐿𝐼 finally stepped forward to answer, but even her voice seemed uncertain as it filled the tiny room. But certain circumstances have risen that suggest otherwise. What circumstances? My voice was stronger than before, and although no one ever dared raise their tone at the elders, my demand ringed across the entire room. They glanced at one another again, uncertainly, like they weren't sure how to approach the subject. Or me. The circumstances that came from the events that took place on your journey into their territory. Kane's eyes darkened, and the glare he shot me didn't hide the fact he was unhappy about my rule-breaking adventure. I clenched my mouth shut. We are going to ask you some questions regarding your encounter with the king. Immerse. And we need your honest answers. All right. This should clear all the confusion. That was Elder 𝐿𝐼. She was my favorite out of all the 4, honestly. And her easy-going mother-like presence helped ease the twisted jumble of thoughts and emotions running through my head. I paused for an uncertain moment before nodding and letting 𝐿𝐼 prop my pillows as the elders all took a seat around the bed on chairs I hadn't realized were there. Why did you venture into his territory? Kane's voice filled the room before all others, and I actually hesitated before answering. They wanted the truth, and I wanted to give it to them. But I feel like admitting the whole reason I wanted to go was because of this nagging voice in my head begging me for just one look at the king. I wanted to see if the rumors about the wolf-borns were true, which was a lie. I wanted to know that too. All of the elders were rather, well, elderly. They had to be in order to make the council. But Elder 𝐾𝐞𝐽 had a certain wrinkled, bully look going for him. He was a council member anyone really wanted to deal with. His beady eyes narrowed at my answer. Let's move on. Elder 𝐿𝐼 interrupted softly before bringing her warm, inviting gaze back to mine. What did you feel the first time you saw him, the king? She asked gently as 𝐿𝐼 stood almost protectively by my side. The council did make big decisions for the town, but if there was a tie, he was the deciding factor. Having him at my side was more than soothing. I didn't really see him at all. He covered himself from head to toe. Did you see any part of him at all? Anything he might have revealed? Images from our brief encounter flashed through my mind, and my heart skipped at the memories. Those eyes that shined bluer than any sea I had ever seen, and made my soul freeze in awe. Yes, I remember the feeling of first time, That sucker punch to my stomach. It felt like someone had punched me straight in the stomach. I didn't miss how they all seemed to shift in easily at the statement. Even 𝐿𝐻. And you felt this when you met his gaze. My frown returned and I glanced uneasily between the 5 sitting around me. My hands curled the blanket around my fingers nervously. How do you know that? I stammered as their eyes all bore holes into my... I was suddenly feeling more than uncomfortable. Like all of my personal thoughts and feelings were out on display for them all to see. Elder Lana's sympathetic look didn't pass me by, and it only made the confusing mess that was my mind worse. Different shifters find their mates in different ways. She spoke softly, her words warm as she tried to give me a reassuring glance. Well, that didn't answer my question at all. In wolf-borns, they recognize their mate through eyes, or locked gazes. My fingers twitched unsteadily at my side. Through eyes, his eyes had been the most bizarre, strangest, beautiful lightning eyes I had ever seen. They were an oddity that I could never seem to break my gaze from. But that didn't mean I was his mate. 𝐿𝐻 was there too. She saw how different his eyes were. 𝐿𝐻 said softly as my voice started to rise in panic. I shot my wide eyes over to him. He seemed calm enough, but his dark eyes were rather sad and nothing to settle the unease in my stomach. We asked her. She said there was nothing significant about them. I ignored the slight grit he had on my shoulder and let out a ragged breath. That was true. His eyes were significant. They weren't any run-of-the-mill, ordinary eyes. They sparked with an electricity that I could feel shooting through me in just a glance. She just didn't get a good enough look at them. We were both there when he gave you back to us. There was nothing special about them. I felt tears prickle my eyes as 𝐿𝐻's voice slowly washed over me. I'm not really sure why, but this is all becoming extremely overwhelming. I sniffled and I tried to raise my hand to rub at my stinging eyes, but failed miserably. My body still didn't want to really move. What do you mean he gave me back to you? I mumbled around the tight knot in my throat as his dark brown eyes gazed down at me worriedly. He shot me a small smile before glancing over to the 4 elders watching our exchange quietly. He met us at the edge of the border with you in his arms. I thought he had harmed you in some way at first, but 𝐿𝐻 convinced me to hear what he had to say, or his soldiers at least. His eyes flashed angrily at that before they softened and shined down at me once again. He did tell us about the gold power though, and how it tried to. 𝐿𝐻 didn't finish his sentence and his dark eyes flashed sadly before glancing away from me. He licked his lips. How it tried to kill you. Yes, we found that very interesting as well. 𝐻𝐻 finished for him and edged closer to the bed as 𝐿𝐻 edged away. I shifted uneasily on the cot. I didn't like being surrounded like this, especially by the Elder Council. It was more frightening than anything. They often decided what criminals lived or died. Why would the gold power try to hurt you like that? 𝐿𝐻 asked softly as I tried not to make it obvious that I kept burrowing further into my pillow and blankets. I swallowed uneasily. I am not really sure, but it wanted him. I admitted as a wave of sleep washed over me. I pushed it aside. I don't know how else to explain it, but I healed his arm and then the power would not let me draw it back inside. I let out a shaky sigh and looked over to a frown, stricken 𝐿𝐻. It was like it no longer wanted to be a part of me. Every single inch of the power wanted to be in him, and it was going to kill me if it had to. Silence filled the tiny cramped room as my words hung in the air easily around us. The 4 elders seemed oddly still, calculating. It was nerve-wracking and did nothing to help the anxiety raging through me. It was only a few moments before Elder 𝐿𝐻 broke the tense silence, but it felt like an awkward eternity. The King of the North seems to believe fully on notion that you are his mate, and we are slowly starting to agree. Even though that's impossible. I muttered as their dark gazes watched over me. Yes, even though that's impossible.